Hello, everyone. I'm Joanna Duran, and I am the CEO of Triage Cancer. And this session is Knowing Your Rights, focused on insurance, work, and finances. Now, you might be wondering why an organization called Triage Cancer is here presenting to you. But in case you're not familiar with Triage Cancer, we are a national nonprofit organization that provides free education on all of the legal and practical issues that come up after a cancer diagnosis. When I tell people about Triage Cancer and that I'm a cancer rights attorney, I always get kind of a funny look from people, and I inevitably get the question, what's legal about health? And my answer back is almost everything. So, whether or not a particular treatment is approved by the Food and Drug Administration is a legal issue. Whether or not that treatment is covered by insurance is a legal issue. Whether or not you get to take time off work to go and get that treatment is a legal issue. But we just don't think of those things as legal issues. The interesting thing is that the protections and the benefits and the programs are all rooted in the law. And so at Triage Cancer, our goal is to teach people about the law. And we do that through providing free educational events and resources and materials to help people understand their rights. Now, the interesting thing is that most of what we talk about is actually not cancer specific at all. And we often say that if all you needed was a law to solve a problem, then you wouldn't need lawyers and you wouldn't need law enforcement. You actually need education and navigation too. So people need to actually understand that there are laws available and know how to use them for their benefit. And to expand people's awareness of the law, we actually rolled out a program last year called Triage Health, which makes much of the information that we have available at Triage Cancer available to everybody, because really many of these topics apply to all of us, like how to pick a health insurance plan and how to understand how to navigate healthcare and know your rights at work and things like making sure you have estate planning documents in place. All of those things are things that all of us should be doing. And so at Triage Health, we have a lot of resources to be able to help you do that. Now, today, I'm going to talk about specifically some of the rights that come up most often when someone is navigating healthcare, specifically to health insurance and understanding medical bills and finances and employment and disability insurance. We provide free educational events at Triage Cancer and at Triage Health, and we do that across the country, both in person and online. We also, on our website, have resources available in two different ways. So we have our resources by topics page, which provides all the information we have on a particular topic in one place. So if you wanted to learn more about disability insurance, for example, you could go to our disability insurance topics page. We also have resources by location, because what you have access to actually depends on where you live. So we have state-specific resources on Triage Cancer, but we also are looking to put that onto Triage Health. And then we have our charts of state laws, which provide information about what's available to you in the areas of health insurance and employment and finances and many other topics. And so you can find that on Triage Health as well. We also know that going to an event or reading materials doesn't necessarily answer all of your questions. And so we do provide a free legal and financial navigation program where people can contact us with any of the questions that they might have about their situation. And that is free to everybody. So specifically talking about health insurance, the challenge in teaching people about health insurance is that no one in the United States actually understands health insurance. And it used to just sort of be my anecdotal experience of doing this work for decades in the cancer community. But now I have some data to back it up. 96% of people in the United States can't define the four key terms used in health insurance coverage. So the question becomes, as consumers, how are we supposed to actually make good choices about health insurance and know how to use our health insurance coverage if we don't know the words. And that same study said that 40% of Americans were very confident that they could choose the right health insurance plan for them. But if they don't understand the words, I have to say they were probably overly confident that they picked the right plan for them. And so if you feel like you don't understand your health insurance coverage, you are absolutely not alone. So I want to spend just a minute talking about some of those key terms. And those terms are around the cost of health insurance and what you pay out of pocket for your medical care. So first we pay our premium, and that's typically paid monthly. It's a fixed dollar amount that we pay each month just to have health insurance. So even if we get no medical care during the year, we still have to pay our monthly premium. But then there are costs that we're going to pay when we actually use our health insurance coverage and get medical care. And the first is our annual deductible. It's a fixed dollar amount that we have to pay each year before our health insurance coverage even kicks in. So you might have a $500 deductible, or you could have a $5,000 deductible, depending on the plan that you have. And then there's something called a copayment. And this is also a fixed dollar amount that we pay each time we get medical care. And you might have a $20 copayment to see a primary care physician, or a $50 copayment to see a specialist, or a $500 copayment if you have to go to the emergency room. Again, the amounts depend on your particular plan. And that's different than coinsurance or cost share. Those are two terms that do actually mean the same thing, and it's a percentage. It's the difference between what insurance companies are paying for our medical expenses and what we pay. So if you have an 80-20 cost share, it means the insurance company is paying 80% and you're responsible for 20%. But the most important thing that any of us should know about our health insurance coverage is our out-of-pocket maximum. Because in a worst case scenario, it's the most that you're going to pay out of pocket for your medical expenses during the year. And it is a fixed dollar amount. So you could have a $1,000 out of pocket maximum, or you might have a $15,000 out of pocket maximum, depending on your plan. And the way you reach your out of pocket maximum is actually a math problem. You add up what you pay for your deductible, plus any co-payments that you pay, plus any co-insurance amounts that you pay, to reach your out-of-pocket maximum. And when you do, then your insurance will kick in at 100% for the rest of the year. So to give you an example of how this works, Dan has a plan that has a $2,000 deductible. It's an 80-20 plan, and he has an $8,000 out-of-pocket maximum. So he's in an accident and he spends a week in the hospital, and he walks out with a $102,000 hospital bill. Assuming he's had no other medical expenses during the year, what does he actually have to pay for that bill? So first he has to pay his $2,000 deductible, which leaves $100,000 left of that bill. But he has an 80-20 plan, so the insurance company is going to pay 80%, and he's responsible for 20%, which is $20,000. But does he actually have to pay the $20,000? No, because he has that $8,000 out-of-pocket maximum, and he's already paid his $2,000 deductible, which means he has another $6,000 to go to reach his out-of-pocket maximum. So he's going to pay $6,000 of that $20,000 bill, and then his insurance is going to kick in and pick up the rest of that $20,000 bill. Now, I'm definitely not suggesting that $8,000 isn't a lot of money, but at least it's a cap on what he would have to pay out of pocket for his medical care. So what I just described is actually in one of our animated videos on health insurance basics. So if you want to see it again, you can take a look at that video. But when we talk about the law, we always say that the devil's in the details. And you have to understand how the out-of-pocket maximum works for your specific plan. For example, if you have a family plan, you're going to have an individual out-of-pocket maximum for each member of the family and family out-of-pocket maximum. And then if you have a marketplace plan, that's actually the most protective for consumers because the out-of-pocket maximum is required to include the deductibles, the co-payments, and the co-insurance amounts, both for any medical care that you receive and prescription drugs. So all of that contributes to the out-of-pocket maximum. But some employer plans can actually carve things out. So they can say, we're going to separate the deductible from the out-of-pocket maximum. So you have to pay the deductible and you have to meet your out-of-pocket maximum. Or they might have a separate out-of-pocket maximum for prescription drugs. So you have one for medical care and one for prescription drugs. So again, you have to really understand how your particular plan works so you know what that out-of-pocket maximum is going to be for you. There are also some key terms related to prescription drugs that we want people to understand. And the first is called the formulary, which is effectively the list of drugs covered by a particular plan. And the formulary is broken down into different payment levels called tiers. And where a drug falls is going to depend on how much you pay out of pocket for that drug. So this is just a sample of what a formulary could look like. At tier 1, you have your cheapest generic drugs. So maybe an antibiotic, where you're only paying a $5 copayment to pick that up at the pharmacy. At tier 2, you would have your more expensive generic drugs and preferred brand name drugs, where instead you'd pay a $25 copayment to pick it up at the pharmacy. And then at tier 3, you would find your more expensive and non-preferred brand name drugs. And here you pay a $100 copayment at the pharmacy. But tier 4 is where you find specialty drugs and drugs that are newly approved by the Food and Drug Administration. And when we're dealing with chronic and serious medical conditions, typically those drugs are falling under those specialty drug tiers. And here you're not paying a fixed dollar copayment. Here you're paying a percentage of the drug cost. And so here the example is 20%. So if you have a drug that's $10,000 a month, you're paying 20% of that $10,000 cost each month. So it's important to understand how your formulary works for your particular plan and for any plans that you're considering for the future, because it's going to greatly differ what you actually pay out of pocket. Now, in the United States, there's only 3 places where we get our health insurance coverage. We're either getting it directly from an insurance company, we could be getting it from the government, and by that I mean Medicare or Medicaid, military, TRICARE plans, maybe VA health, other state and local programs. But about 50% of people in the United States get their health insurance coverage through an employer. And we feel very strongly that it's incredibly important for people to understand all of the health insurance options that are available to them in order to make good decisions about what's going to work best for them. And so we have a lot of resources to help people understand their health insurance options so that you can pick the best plan for you. But then the question becomes, once you've narrowed down your plan options, how do you actually compare them? And I'm going to walk you through an exercise that you could use if you're comparing different plans available to you in the marketplace. You could compare different options that your employer is giving you. You can compare what your employer is giving you to the marketplace plans, or you can use this exercise to compare Medicare Advantage plans. So here we have 3 different plans. There's a bronze plan at $200 a month, with an $8,000 out-of-pocket maximum. There's a silver plan at $275 a month with a $6,000 out-of-pocket maximum. A platinum plan at $400 a month with a $2,000 out-of-pocket maximum. So the question is, can you tell just by looking at these plans, which is actually going to cost you the least by the end of the year? Assuming that you are going to hit your out-of-pocket maximum. Because generally when we're talking about serious and chronic medical conditions, the chances that you're going to hit your out-of-pocket maximum is higher. So the answer is no, you can absolutely not tell just by looking at them. You actually have to do the math. And the way that you do the math is that you take the monthly premium and you multiply it by 12, because that's how much it's going to cost you to have the plan for a year. And then you add that to the out-of-pocket maximum, because that's the most that you're going to pay out of pocket for your medical care during the year. So monthly premium times 12 plus the out-of-pocket maximum. And when you do the math for each of these three plans, it turns out that the platinum level plan actually ends up saving you a few $1,000s by the end of the year, even though we get sticker shock when we look at the monthly premium for that platinum plan compared to the bronze plan. And the truth is that most people only shop for health insurance coverage by looking at the monthly premium, because they don't understand how out-of-pocket maximums work, and they're not taking that into the equation. But it is an important part because it can greatly increase what you pay out of pocket for your medical care. So when we're talking about how do we minimize the financial hardship of a serious or chronic medical condition, this is what we mean: making sure that you have adequate health insurance coverage to cover your costs and minimize those out-of-pocket expenses. But it isn't just cost that you should be looking at when choosing a health insurance plan. You also want to make sure that your providers are covered by that particular plan and are in network for that plan. And you want to make sure that it covers the prescription drugs that you're taking. Because if you pick a plan, even if it's the cheapest plan, if it doesn't cover your providers and your prescription drugs, those are going to be out of network or not covered, and you're going to have to pay out of pocket to get access to those providers and those prescription drugs, which will increase your costs. So you want to make sure that you're taking that into consideration as well. I mentioned that we have a lot of resources to understand your health insurance options. We also have some resources that help with picking a health insurance plan. So we have an animated video that explains how to pick a plan. And then we also have a worksheet that can help you do the math. So you can take this worksheet and print it out from the website and actually fill in the boxes to figure out how much that plan is actually going to cost you. So those are free resources that are available to you. So once you've narrowed down your choices and you want to actually sign up for a plan, the question is, when do you do that? So maybe you have a plan now that isn't working well for you. When do you have the opportunity to actually change that plan? If you have an employer plan, it could depend on the employer. So it could happen any time of year, but it often happens in the fall. So open enrollment for employers often happens in the fall, because if they have a calendar year plan, it will start January 1st. So they let people make changes in the fall, which will start in January. Whereas if you're applying for Medicaid, those applications are accepted year-round. There's no specific enrollment period. If you have Medicare, the open enrollment period for Medicare every year is October 15th to December 7th. But even if you decide to make changes on October 15th, those don't go into effect until January 1st, because Medicare is a calendar year plan. So it covers you starting January 1st. And the same thing is true of the marketplace plans. Those are also calendar year plans and start on January 1st. But open enrollment for the marketplace is November 1st to January 15th. But if you want your changes to actually take place starting January 1st, you actually need to make those choices by December 15th, so that there's at least a couple weeks for that to get implemented, so the coverage begins January 1st. But if you happen to not get around to it, you actually have until January 15th to make those decisions, and then your coverage will start the first of the following month. So once you've made decisions about which plans, this is when you can actually sign up for them. In addition to knowing all of your health insurance options, you also need to know how to use your insurance. And using your insurance effectively can actually help you lower your costs. And I want to talk about a couple of key things that can help you do that. And the first is the issue of appeals. It is not unusual for someone to be denied coverage for care by their insurance at some point during their life. But the problem is that most people take no for an answer, and you don't have to. If an insurance company denies coverage for a prescription drug or treatment or surgery, you can appeal that denial. And if you have private health insurance, like an individual plan through the marketplace or an employer plan, you actually have two levels of appeal. You have an internal appeal where you go back to your insurance company and ask them to reconsider. But if they still say no, you actually get to go outside the insurance company and file an external appeal with an independent entity. And that independent entity is going to decide whether or not it's medically necessary for you to get access to the care that your healthcare team prescribed for you. And if they decide that it is, then that decision is actually binding on the insurance company. And so this is a great consumer benefit where in most cases it's entirely free to file this external appeal and get access to that independent decision. And I will tell you, about 50% of the time across the country, patients are actually successful in getting access to the care through an external appeal. So it's one of these processes that actually works in favor of patients. The problem is that no one knows that this exists, because here is data that shows us in 2021, marketplace plans had 48 million claims that were denied. 48 million claims. But only 0.1% of those denials were appealed, even to the first level of appeal, let alone an external appeal, which means that 99.9% of people took no for an answer when their insurance company said they weren't going to cover the care that was prescribed by their healthcare team. So this is a pretty staggering statistic, and it really comes from the idea that people don't know. They don't know what their rights are to appeal those denials, and that it's likely to be successful. So sometimes the law provides protections, and sometimes it's not worth it to pursue those protections. This isn't one of those situations. If 50% of the time insurance companies are having to overturn their denials, that means in this case, about 24 million people may have gotten access to the care that was prescribed by their healthcare team. But because they didn't appeal, either they weren't getting access to that care or they were paying for that care out of their own pocket when their insurance company should have paid for it. So the external appeals process is a bit of a soapbox issue for us because we want people to know about this beneficial protection. So we have a lot of resources to help people navigate the appeals process across all types of health insurance coverage. So I want to turn for a minute to managing medical bills, because even if you have the best health insurance coverage, you're still going to get medical bills. And unfortunately, that is sometimes a complicated process because it generates a lot of paperwork. Even if that paperwork is being emailed to you or something that you get access to through an insurance company portal, it's still a lot of paper. And that communication from your insurance company could include, we've received a claim from your provider. You don't have to do anything, we're just letting you know. It could also be a letter that says, we're now processing your claim. Again, you don't have to do anything, we're just letting you know. But then ultimately, you'll receive an explanation of benefits or an EOB from your insurance company explaining how they handled your claim. And it generally looks something like this, where they have provided information about the claim. They provide information about how they handled the claim and what they've paid to the provider. And then they tell you what you are responsible for paying now that they've paid their portion. But somewhere on that EOB, it says this is not a bill. So you don't pay your EOB. It's just an explanation from the insurance company of how they handled your claim. So then the last piece of paper you're going to receive is the bill from your provider. The problem is that paperwork doesn't always arrive in order. And so it can create a lot of confusion where sometimes you get the bill from your provider before you receive the explanation of benefits. And sometimes that provider is a lot faster at sending the bill and hasn't taken into consideration what the insurance company is going to pay. So the bill might actually be charging you for something the insurance company is going to pay for. So we always recommend, to avoid the challenges of this process, is to wait for the explanation of benefits before you pay any bills, and then compare them. So take the EOB and match it up with the bill and make sure that the bill is correct based on the explanation of benefits. And if you have any questions about what's included on the EOB or the bill, and if they don't match up, then you should be communicating both with your provider and with your insurance company to understand what actually went wrong and to make sure you know what you are actually responsible for paying. Because the last thing that you want to do is overpay and then be in a situation where you're trying to get that money back from a provider. I will also just mention that if it turns out you have a medical bill from a hospital stay or care that you received at a hospital, nonprofit hospitals are actually required to provide financial assistance to patients. And every hospital has a different level of income that someone might have to have in order to qualify for that program, but they are required to actually tell patients that it exists. The problem is that isn't always clear to patients. And sometimes you might receive a medical bill even though you might qualify for some of that financial assistance. So how are we supposed to understand that this is something that's available, or how to actually tap into that benefit? Can be complicated. There is an organization called $4, and it is a nonprofit organization that helps patients navigate this process. So even if you've already gotten a medical bill and you're worried about how to pay it, you can actually contact $4 and they'll help you figure out if your medical bill should have received financial assistance based on your income level and your hospital's program. So they do the legwork to figure it out, and then they also help you work with the hospital to actually get your medical bill reduced. So this is a really fantastic free service that is available, and I wanted to make people more aware of it. And then certainly if it turns out on your explanation of benefits that your insurance company is saying they're not going to provide coverage for something and they deny it, that's another moment to appeal those denials. The other benefit to keeping track of your medical bills is that those actually might be tax deductible. So what you're paying out of pocket for the healthcare that you're receiving, including if you have to travel to treatment, for example, whether it's parking or tolls or mileage or even an airline flight, all of those things could potentially be tax deductible, and if you are itemizing your taxes. And so that's actually a place where you could save some money by keeping those records, because it might lower what you have to pay for your taxes, or it might increase the refund that's available to you. So staying organized and keeping track of your medical bills could actually save you some money. And we do actually have some tools to help you do that, including a medical bill tracking form on our website. The other thing that many people don't realize when it comes to medical bills is if you're in a situation where you can't pay the full bill or it's going to cause a financial hardship, you could potentially negotiate those bills with your providers. This is pretty common, especially when it comes to hospitals or healthcare systems that are larger, where people can actually set up payment plans to pay their bills. But it's important not to ignore the bills and then wait for them to be sent to a collection agency, because at that point, it's a lot harder to negotiate. So you want to make sure that as soon as you receive the bill, that you're communicating with the provider that you're having a challenge paying it and asking what the options might be. And those options could include the payment plan to be able to pay a certain amount each month to pay off the bill, where it won't get sent to collections and you're also not paying interest on that bill. But it might also be that they're willing to write off a portion of the bill, especially if you are able to pay a lump sum. So for example, if the bill is for $1,000, but you're only able to pay $500, they might actually accept the $500 lump sum payment and write off the rest of the bill because they'd rather have the payment now than set up a payment plan over multiple years. So every provider is different, but the key is if you don't ask the question, then they're unlikely to offer this as an option. You do need to ask to see what the possibilities might be. And then once you've figured out what you do actually owe and if there's financial assistance available through the hospital, and to understand what you have to pay still to reach your out-of-pocket maximum, then you might want to look at what financial assistance options might be available to you in your community to help you actually pay your medical bills. And we always encourage people to think creatively about financial assistance because sometimes people will say to me, I need help paying my medical bills, and they're only looking for financial assistance related to medical bills. But maybe they qualify for a utility assistance program in their community. And so if they can get the utility assistance, then they can take that money for utility assistance that they're receiving and shift that money over to pay for their medical bills. So sometimes in a crisis moment, sometimes people don't think broadly about what might be available. So we just like to remind people to think as broadly as possible when thinking about financial assistance options. Now, options could take lots of different forms. I mentioned utility assistance, but maybe it's food or housing assistance. It could be prescription drug assistance. It could be copay assistance. There are so many different types of financial assistance programs out there. The hard part is that you have to do the work to search for them. And at Triage Health, we have compiled some of those resources in our toolkit for navigating finances. So you can find a variety of different types of resources organized by the type on our website. That does also include financial assistance for prescription drugs specifically. It is important to realize that the companies that make drugs actually have patient assistance programs. And those programs include lots of different things. So it might be copay assistance for that drug. It could be free drugs based on your circumstances. It could be free trial vouchers. It could be help for denials. If an insurance company's denied coverage for a drug, they can help provide background information to support your appeal. So there are lots of tools available through these programs. So if you're looking for assistance with prescription drugs, I strongly recommend checking to see if your drug company that makes the drug you're taking actually has these programs. I do also want to share that we have a drug discount card that we offer in partnership with an organization called Needy Meds. Now, there are lots of different types of discounts for prescription drugs across the country, but the key thing about these cards is they're not specific to a type of medical condition. They're not specific to an individual. You can walk into the pharmacy and say, I have a high copayment if I use my insurance. What do I have to pay out of pocket if I use this discount card instead? And again, the pharmacist might come back and say, oh, we don't take this drug discount card, but I do know of these other options. The key about this card is that it's really just a tool to remind you to ask the question, is there a way to lower my out-of-pocket costs? So this can be a very helpful tool if you are in a situation where you get to the pharmacy and find out that what you have to pay out of pocket is very high and is a challenge. These drug discount cards might actually be a great resource for you. Now, I do want to just highlight that there are a couple of things that are happening that are a little bit timely, where there are opportunities to save money related to health insurance options. The state health insurance marketplaces I've referred to a couple of times. If you're not familiar with them, they're effectively an insurance shopping mall in your state to find the private insurance options that are available to you. But there are some benefits to actually buying insurance through the marketplace, including that They have a lot of consumer protections included. And one example of that is that there is a cap on the out-of-pocket maximum for the plans sold in the marketplace. So this year, plans are not allowed to have an out-of-pocket maximum more than $9,450 for an individual. And if you buy a plan through the marketplace, you may be eligible for financial assistance based on your household income level. And there are two types of financial assistance. There are premium tax credits, which lower your monthly premium. And then there are cost sharing subsidies, which lower your out-of-pocket costs. But I want to highlight something specific. This is what it looks like based on household income level. If you have a family of four making under $120,000 a year, you would qualify for some type of financial assistance to buy a plan in the marketplace. As a result of COVID and two federal laws that actually were dealing with the financial impacts of COVID for the country, those laws actually added financial assistance to the marketplace. And this year, 4 out of 5 people are actually able to find a marketplace plan for $10 or less per month. So that's pretty significant. And the reason I mention this is because a lot of people may have looked at marketplace plans 10 years ago when they first started and thought that the premiums were too high based on where they live. That has significantly changed over time. So if someone's in a situation where they're looking for ways to decrease their monthly premiums for health insurance, taking a look at the marketplace may be a good option for you. I'll also just add that if someone has a household income over 400% of the federal poverty level, they also added financial assistance at the top end of the spectrum so that if it actually costs a family more than 8.5% of their household income to buy health insurance, they will get discounts on their monthly premium so that it won't cost more than 8.5% of their household income. The reason this is timely is that next year is the last year that this will be in effect. So it only created this additional financial assistance through the end of 2025. And Congress actually has been proposing extending this financial assistance, but we are in an election year and we don't know if Congress will actually get around to doing this. So this is something to pay attention to, but at least it is in effect for next year. I also want to mention some changes to Medicare that impact cost for 2025. As a result of one of those same laws, the Inflation Reduction Act, it capped out-of-pocket prescription drug costs for Medicare for the very first time. So prior to this year, Medicare did not cap what someone would have to pay for prescription drug costs. There was no out-of-pocket maximum. So starting this year, that out-of-pocket maximum was $8,000. And next year it will drop to $2,000. So that's pretty significant. So we went from no cap to an $8,000 cap this year to next year, there'll be a $2,000 cap. And then it also adds the Medicare prescription payment plan. So if you have an expensive drug, instead of having to pay maybe that full $2,000 in January, for example, you can actually spread out the costs of that drug throughout the year. So for example, if you had that full $2,000 cost in January, instead of paying $2,000 when you pick up that drug at the pharmacy, you actually can spread out the cost over the year. So it would be $167 a month if you spread it out over the full course of the year. So it makes it a little bit easier for people to actually pay those out-of-pocket costs. So these are really monumental changes for Medicare for next year. And if you want more information about this, we do have resources to help you understand the details of how this is going to work. There are also 2 programs in Medicare to help with out-of-pocket costs. There are the Medicare savings programs, which help with out-of-pocket costs for Part A and Part B of Medicare. And they have 4 different names. So you can learn more about the Medicare savings programs and which one you might qualify for based on your income level. And then there are also programs to help with prescription drug costs under Medicare. So the low income subsidy, or the LIS program, helps with out of pocket costs for prescription drugs. And then some states have state pharmaceutical assistance programs. Now, turning to work, there are actually a lot of options to help someone understand their rights at work. And that could be about working during treatment or taking time off, or replacing lost wages if you have to take time off, or even understanding your retirement options and how each of those decisions have implications on benefits. I mentioned that there are a lot of places to go for employment rights. There are laws that protect people against discrimination at work or give them access to reasonable accommodations, and those are referred to as fair employment laws. And then there are laws that we call leave laws, which allow you to take time off work and access some job protections. But there might also be policies specific to an employer that you can tap into. And that might include benefits, but it could be, how do I take time off? Do I have vacation time or sick time or general paid time off? All of those things are key to understanding if you want to know all of the rights and options that are available to you at work. We have resources to help you understand your employment rights on our website. But if someone is taking time off work, how do you replace those lost wages? And that's primarily done through disability insurance. And disability insurance is paying you, and it could be anywhere between 45 and really 90% of your salary. But there's different types of disability insurance. There's private insurance that you can buy directly from an insurance company, but most people get access to private disability insurance through an employer, where they're including that as an employee benefit. And that could be a short-term plan that is generally from 6 to 12 months, or it could be a long-term disability plan for medical conditions that last at least a year or longer. There are key things to know about your private disability insurance policy. So you want to understand how it defines disability. What's the benefit? Is it 45% or 90%? And is there a waiting period before you actually can start getting access to those benefits? A handful of states, really 5, and Puerto Rico have state disability insurance options. So this is just an example of California's plan. But then there are the 2 federal long-term disability programs that are offered through the Social Security Administration, which are Social Security Disability Insurance and Supplemental Security Income. There are key things to understand about options for disability insurance, but also what do you do once you get those benefits? So we have resources available on disability insurance. And then the last thing that I want to mention is it's very important for you to have access to your medical records and to have a copy of those records for a variety of reasons, including if you're applying for disability insurance. And you do have the right for a copy of your medical records, which you can request at any time for any reason. It could be, you could ask for a full copy or just a partial copy, and you get to decide the format the medical records are provided in. So do you want a paper copy? Do you want it on a USB drive? And a provider is not allowed to withhold access to your medical records if you have an outstanding medical bill. And under HIPAA's privacy rule, providers do have to provide you with a copy of medical records within 30 days. Or if it happens that the medical records are kept off-site, they have 60 days to get that copy to you. So we have a quick guide to accessing medical records to understand the details about your rights there too. We have a number of other places where you can go for more information about these topics, including our webinar series and our upcoming conference on October 25th and 26th. And I do want to remind you that we have our legal and financial navigation program where you can get answers to your questions. So thank you very much for being with me today, and hope that you will stay connected and know that you have a lot of resources for additional information on these topics and others. Have a good day.